Have you been told you need to stop doing what you love, whether it's exercise, running, or a sport? Well, here at Dynamic, we don't like that answer. In this podcast, we'll talk to leaders in the health and wellness space from Southwest Florida to get the solutions you need to get you back to doing what you love. Welcome to the Dynamic Naples Podcast. What's going on in Southwest Florida? I'm back talking about the nervous system once again. Sorry if I'm beating a dead horse. But this is just, the longer I've been doing this, the more I've realized that this is kind of a key thing that we're all missing. It's not being talked about enough. So today, I'm going to be talking about stress and how it affects your blood sugar. Because when your blood sugar is poorly managed, a lot of things go wrong. Your thyroid goes off, it triggers autoimmune disease, you become insulin resistant, diabetic, weight gain. All these things start with insulin resistance. I've talked about this before. There's a great book by Benjamin Bickman called Why We Get Sick, and it really just paints the picture of how insulin resistance is the underlying culprit to so many issues that we deal with. So this will probably have a lot of overlap with the last podcast I did, which was breathing and stress. And you can use these tools like breathing and ice baths and things like that to manage blood sugar. So tons of overlap here and a lot of things that sort of cross-reference. So let me dive into stress a little bit first. So I'm not just talking about emotional stress. It could be financial stress. It could be physical stress. Even your internal stress, like actually blood sugar dysregulation is a form of stress in itself. There is good stress, bad stress. So you probably heard me talk about hormesis or the hormetic effect or hormetic stressors. And technically, the term is really eustress. So a eustress, that's E-U-S-T-R-E-S-S. A eustress is something that elicits a positive adaptation. You exercise, maybe doing cardio. It brings your heart rate up, but the long-term adaptation is your resting heart rate goes down. This is true of blood pressure, blood sugar regulation, all these things that have the intended effect of making you a stronger, more resilient person. That is a eustress. But what can happen is too much of a good thing can be bad, or too much of repetition of the same thing, or a heightened response to stress that you don't recover from as well can lead to some negative things. There is a mnemonic called NUTS to explain stressors. So that's N is the novelty of an event, U is the unpredictable nature of an event, T as the threat to the body, or the perceived threat to body or ego, and S is for a sense of loss of control. So all these types of stressors can be huge. So something like financial trouble, work stress, chronic illness, relationship difficulties, speaking in public, all these things can be a perceived stressor. So when the body perceives stress, it goes into the sympathetic state. The sympathetic state triggers the hormone cortisol. That's the stress hormone. And then cortisol, its job is to get you prepared to either fight or flee, the fight or flight mode. All right, so what it wants to do is secrete or liberate glucose into the bloodstream, because glucose is a fuel source, just like lipids or fats are a fuel source. The body can burn glucose or access glucose a little faster than it can lipids. So in an emergency situation, it's advantageous for the individual to have glucose in the bloodstream, in case you have to get in a fight or flee. So there are certain systems of the body that are sort of augmented or are inhibited because these are certain things you don't need. You don't need to digest if you're in a fight. That's, by the way, why you shouldn't watch TV and eat food, because you literally will absorb less of your nutrients, because watching TV is a very sympathetic state of being. Your eyes will dilate so you can take in more light. Your blood vessels constrict so you can get blood to the muscles and oxygen to the muscles faster. These are just a few of the examples of what happens in a sympathetic state. Now here's the problem. It's not like it's either you're purely sympathetic or not. There's a gradient, so you can be in a mildly sympathetic state. And the problem is with modern society, for most of us, we're kind of chronically in a sympathetic state. I learned this when I wore a glucose monitor, which I'll get into a little more, because you can look at your blood sugar, and if it's elevated chronically, you can pretty much be sure you're in a sympathetic state. So just think about, what's your day like? Are you reading emails frantically? Are you rushing to work? Are you running to Starbucks on your break? Are you squeezing in a workout on your lunch break? Are you dealing with problems at home or kids or whatever it is? There's very little sort of downtime for most people in this country. And because of that, we're very rarely in the parasympathetic state. So that's something you should do, is seek out parasympathetic behaviors. Read a book, take a walk, get a massage, yoga, meditation. All these things are ways to turn off sympathetic mode. And as I alluded to in the last podcast, something as simple as breathing can put you into, focusing on breathing, intentional breathing, can put you into a parasympathetic state. So if you're chronically in sympathetic mode, the cortisol is chronically pumping, and then you're putting glucose into the blood. Then your pancreas has to secrete insulin to try to usher that out of the bloodstream. And chronic exposure to insulin makes you insulin resistant. Then one of the things that insulin does is makes things grow, like a steroid, but it makes fat cells grow too, so you start gaining weight. So that's the relationship between stress and diabetes. So it's really insulin resistance is the issue, and that's what makes you gain weight, and that's what makes you diabetic. A lot of people think that becoming obese makes you diabetic. It's kind of not exactly the right idea. It's really becoming insulin resistant causes both those things. And by the way, you don't have to be overweight to be diabetic. There's something called TOFI, thin on the outside, fat on the inside, so you can develop fat around the viscera, around the organs. Like that's what fatty liver disease is. So just because someone is maybe even ripped does not mean that they're not diabetic. So those things can be exclusive. So anyway, if you want to find out, there's blood tests you can do, obviously. But there's problems with blood testing. You're getting a snapshot, so it's not always 100% accurate. And there's some question about the reference ranges. Sometimes those reference ranges change over time to reflect normal, quote unquote normal. But normal could mean just the center of the bell curve, so normal for United States maybe. And it's not like we're a very healthy country. So normal is not necessarily good in the case of blood testing. So some of the reference ranges are not completely accurate in my opinion. And then let's take fasting glucose. So if you fasted all night and you go take your glucose score, well, that's when it's going to be at your lowest because you're probably in ketosis or burning fats because you haven't had a meal. So that is a weird way, in my opinion, to measure your blood sugar. Because that literally will be the lowest point in your day. I think the best way to measure glucose is a continuous glucose monitor, a CGM. It's something you wear on your arm. I did it for a month. Got tons of great insight. It gives you real-time data. You eat a meal and you see a 2-hour window of what happens to your blood sugar. And you learn, what spikes you, because it's not the same for everybody. For example, for me, I learned that jasmine rice would spike my blood sugar pretty high, and that basmati would not. I learned that green tea actually had a very good effect on my blood glucose, bringing it down 10 to 20 points. I learned that driving was a sympathetic enough state of mind for me that it would pretty much jack my glucose into a basically diabetic state. I learned that arguments with my wife would basically make me diabetic, and that became a joke for us. And we have a disagreement. I'm like, you're making me diabetic. Exercise would sort of, initially bring it up a bit, and then it would drop it down. But I wasn't doing like any crazy HIIT training or anything like that, just general strengthening. Same thing with ice bath. Ice bath with initial increase because it is a mild stressor, but then over hours it would keep the blood sugar pretty flat. So you can develop strategies around this. So, for example, one of the things I've adopted as a habit now is green tea brings my blood sugar down. Driving brings it up, so I just drink green tea while I'm driving as a way to try to buffer the sort of ongoing onslaught of stress from traffic. This is why I've become such a big fan of the Wim Hof method, because it's a combination of breathing and doing the ice plunge. They're two virtually free things to do. Ice baths, there's ways to do it. You can buy like a horse trough I got mine at Rural King store. For like $94, and I just freeze ice, stick it in there. It's so easy, feels so good, and every time I do that, I sleep like a baby. Speaking of, I might as well plug our upcoming event, April 29th on a Saturday. We've got Yuri Opendik coming for another Wim Hof seminar. This is our fourth one. Every time, it's amazing. So if you're in Naples, check it out. I will definitely put a link in the show notes for that event. But at the end of the day, most people need to seek more parasympathetic activity. I think that's the key if you want to stay healthy, live a healthy life, decrease your blood pressure, your blood sugar. All those things are super important to your health. So that's it for today, Southwest Florida. I'll be talking to you soon. Why guess when you can test? Do you get hangry or crash after a carb-heavy meal? These could be indicators that there is a dysfunction in your blood glucose regulation. If left unchecked, it can lead to irreversible changes. If you catch it quick enough, you can make diet and lifestyle changes that will get your levels where they need to be. 88% of Americans are pre-diabetic and don't know it. Diabetes underpins many of the pathologies we deal with in this country, such as obesity, high blood pressure, heart disease, and stroke. For some reason, it is rarely screened with your physician, and if they do test for blood glucose, it's usually with an A1C or a fasting glucose, which can sometimes give you a false negative. NutriSense is a company that supplies continuous glucose monitors. We've paired with NutriSense to get you real-time data to see how your physiology responds to glucose. The NutriSense app lets you track your daily activity to see how food, sleep, exercise, and stress impact your glucose. You can log or import this data into the NutriSense app to see the effect on your blood glucose levels as soon as it happens. Use the code DrChris25 for $25 off your order today. Do you have unexplained pain? Or do you wonder just how healthy you are? When was the last time you had your blood tested? Blood chemistry analysis is a great tool to stay ahead of any health conditions, and now you can have control of your health with Let's Get Checked. Let's Get Checked is an incredible company that sends blood tests to your home. You can choose from over 30 different tests, whether that's thyroid function, testosterone, micronutrient, cholesterol, or C-reactive protein, which is a marker for inflammation. It is sent to you with free shipping, and you get your results in 2 to 5 days. No physician referral needed. Use the code DPT25 for 25% off. You can find links in the show notes. Did you know that you can get started with physical therapy without a physician's referral? Physical therapists don't just solve pain, we get down to the root cause and keep it from coming back. We also discuss all things health, such as nutrition and lifestyle changes. If you feel that you could use some help, let's get on a free consult call. Go to www.dynamicnaples.com and sign up for a free call. Also, if you like this podcast, please give us a rating wherever you listen to podcasts. It helps us spread the message. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.